Well, thank you. I am grateful to Bill for asking me to think about these questions because it gives me a chance to articulate for myself how I feel about my faith. And I decided to talk in particular about the relationship for me between being an artist, in my case being an imaginative writer, and my spiritual life. So I'll talk a little bit about the Quaker principles that I think inform that. And I have some quotations from artists that have inspired me. I don't have any quotations from famous Quakers, but they're artists, and I hope that I can articulate to you something of why I believe that art and faith are so close for me. So I'm a writer, and I write mostly fiction and teach fiction and American literature at Drake University. And as a writer, I have always found two difficulties. The first is that being a writer and perhaps being an artist of any kind is enormously selfish in some ways. It takes such huge amounts of time and solitude, especially I think if you're a writer, that the time away that's required from my family, my husband and my son, my friends, my work at Drake, it's very hard to find. It's very hard to find it in any sustained way, and it has often made me feel enormously guilty. That may be gendered in some ways. I don't know if men may feel less guilty about taking those volumes of time, but for me it's always been a struggle. And not because I don't have a very generous husband and son who let me have that time, but because it just feels selfish. The second difficulty that I have always had with being an imaginative writer is that in most ways I'm a revolutionary at heart, and the world is on fire, and there's nothing that imaginative writing can do to address that in the ways that I feel so urgently it needs to be addressed. So I was not born to wave signs and to agitate, even though I feel pulled in those directions. But I believe in being an activist, and I have not been able to successfully bridge being an activist through my writing because I write fiction, and they're fundamentally incompatible a lot of the time. So I've had to struggle with how can I address the urgency, the exigencies of this world, and still write my fiction and feel that those are not always so contrasting. So I was very grateful to Bill. The way he put it to me was, answer this statement: here is what I do, and I am a Quaker. So that's all I'm going to presume to do, is just try to address that. Here is what I do, and I am a Quaker. So there are a few principles that I can only name in hindsight as being more or less Quakerly. Not that I started out saying I'm going to live by these Quaker principles, but I think I identify them as being Quakerly. One of them is, I'll just go through them quickly and then try to tell a story that I think touches on them. One of them has to do with the quality of disappearing, of a kind of self-effacement, so that I can be moved by something greater than me. And I'm not exactly sure that that's Quakerly, but I always think of that line about come down where we ought to be. And for me, the humbleness of my ego disappearing when I try to create. And what what is allowed in if I can make my small self go away and connect with a larger self, a creator self, then for me, that's an act of faith. Secondly, and I've experienced this pretty powerfully recently, is the awareness that composing a story involves constant acts of discernment. That especially with fiction, but really with any kind of writing, I think, that I do, to figure out what's going to happen next really does mean waiting upon the Lord for me, waiting for a way to open. And so it's just a series of actions where I try to have enough faithfulness that way will open, to make the next sentence, to begin the next scene, to end a chapter, and so forth. And then the last one was really powerful for me recently, which was just realizing that my understanding of why we don't have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and the days of the week as the days of the old Nordic gods or whatever, and do first day, second day, third day, is because every day is the Lord's day, and they should all be the same. And I experienced a sense of every moment, every day and every moment being equally special in an artistic way, and I'll try to describe that. So this year I was on sabbatical from Drake, and I embarked on the revising of a novel that I had written that my editors that had seen it weren't satisfied with, and it became a new book, basically a completely different book. So, and I realized to my horror that it actually is a war novel too. So I did a lot of research and basically wrote a new book. I have to be back in class at the end of August, and here it was approaching the middle of summer, and I wasn't as far along as I needed to be. So my family let me go to a retreat center that I go to almost every year. It's a Catholic, well, it's a Franciscan retreat center near Cedar Rapids. And I've gone there to write most every time for about a week. And this year, as I headed over, it's quite a wonderful refuge to me to go there. But this year, as I headed over, I realized that the bulk of the work that I had to do, based on what I have lined up for the rest of the summer, was too big for the time that I had in which to do it. And yet I really did need to finish. So I told myself, you really are going to need to trust some power greater than you to be able to finish the work that you need to do in this week. So I went, and I did in fact find that I finished. There was much prayer and meditation as well as work, and I had some moments where my having told myself that I would have to work, I guess you could say, in collaboration with a creative force that was going to help me get it done. I experienced that very powerfully, to where there were many hours where it really did seem that I was being worked through or being written. And if you're an artist or a writer, you know very well what I'm talking about. That feeling of that the words are coming through you, and that there is that kind of flow. Okay, so it wasn't like I experienced it for the first time, but I was very grateful that I experienced it in this week where I had such a burden, such an enormous task in front of me. And one of the awarenesses that came to me was that it's actually a phrase from Al-Anon, which is "let go and let God." And for the first time, I realized, oh, they don't mean just in times of crisis. They mean every single moment that you were able to let that happen. And how I made it to 50 and not realize that, I don't know. But it was enormous for me to realize that if I had the courage, I could give up every moment in that way that I felt when I was writing, and that power was flowing through me, and the creative source was absolutely lit. So Bill had also asked, if you live by Quaker principles, where might you be in 5 years? And I just hope I have more of those moments in 5 years' time. It also, I believe, takes courage to receive those kinds of gifts, to have words, music, images, colors, whatever, flow through you. Your ego does have to be quite strong. Your sense of self has to be quite strong. And you also have to know how to let it go. So I think I experienced for the first time more courage than I ever had in being able to receive the gifts that were coming through me. And one of the thoughts I had about that is, because I had moments where I felt so absolutely used up in a perfect way and so alive that I thought for the first time, is it possible that what is wanted of us is to do what makes us come alive? That despite all of the urgency and the brokenness in the world, what if doing what makes us feel so profoundly, authentically who we are, is the most godly thing that we can do? And I was very grateful that that realization is at least meaningful to me, and I was grateful for it because it helps to heal a little bit that gap I feel between the urgency to fix the world's brokenness and my artistic tendencies, which are more of who I am. So one of the quotations that moves me the most is by Glenn Gould, who is he played Bach, and he was very famous for doing that. And he said this: I believe that the justification of art is the internal combustion it ignites in the hearts of men, and not its shallow, externalized public manifestations. The purpose of art is not the release of a momentary ejection of adrenaline, but is rather the gradual, lifelong construction of a state of wonder and serenity. And I love the idea that he too gets that every moment has the possibility to be that way. But the most important thing is that I am not special. You know, I can say I'm an artist because I do write and that is what I do. But I don't think that being an artist is special at all. And I don't think artists should see themselves as special. Because that kind of creativity and receptiveness that is demanded of us in art is a spiritual state that we would do well to strive for all the time. And that's not something that only I am deserving of. People have experienced flow who are runners, who are mechanics, who pack tuna. You know, it doesn't matter. It's that you are living the life that is the rightness. That's not very articulate, but you are living your right life, and you feel totally used up and centered about that. That's when I think that moment comes. So I don't want anyone to think that what I'm saying is that being an artist is special. I think we're all more deserving of those moments, and for me, it comes through writing. So one of my favorite poets, I'll leave you with a couple of lines. Walt Whitman said that all music is what awakes from you when you are reminded by the instruments. And when I lose faith in my own creative abilities, I like to remember that I'm not making it. It's being called from me. And two quotes that I'll set in opposition to each other and then finish. One is by Ihab Hassan, an educator who said, "Is it possible to teach English so that people stop killing each other?" And no, I don't think it is. But on the other hand, Frederick Bruckner said, "Vocation is the place where your deep gladness meets the world's deep need." So I don't have to fix the world in the way I see other people doing it. I have to attend to what's being called from me. And then one more quotation by one of my favorite poets, Theodore Roethke. He said, "May all my silences become more accurate."